judges already as well. And the audience as well. Thank you for being here. All right. Thank you everyone very much for being here this afternoon. We do really appreciate it. Welcome to the national finals of this division. Hope you're going to enjoy this as much as my opponents, and I most certainly will. Thank you very much and congratulations. Let's take a look at the resolution first of all, as well as the wing mechanism, just so we're all on the same page about the resolution and what it's asking us to do today. The resolution states that player safety should be the new focus in soccer. A couple of definitions. Player safety essentially is limiting injuries, especially those of us related to head injuries, as you'll see later on in this case. Should be the new focus. Essentially should be, is this a good idea or not? The new focus would mean the primary or main consideration as opposed to the old. We'll get into what those were in just a moment. As well, the new focus in soccer, soccer being an international sport, also known as football outside the United States as well. We'll take a look at this, examining all levels of the soccer sport as well. So three contentions then to help us actually address this, and we'll be using weighing mechanism to help us understand these contentions called net benefits, essentially. Because the resolution says, is this a good idea or not? We'll be examining if this is more beneficial than costly to actually do this and to make this the new focus of soccer at each various level. The three contentions then are first, the past focus, second, priorities, and third, the danger. So first, the past focus. I'm just going to give you a brief timeline from FIFA about what the past focus in soccer has been over the last couple of centuries, actually, because this is a fairly old sport, actually. During the 1800s, when it first began in England, the main focus was on the same, giving you the basic rules as far as how many players could be on the field, what you could do. Basically, you can't use your hands. Essentially, it's one of the main rules that everyone probably is familiar with. Just the very basics of soccer were first outlined during the 1800s. And then moving into the 1900s as well, you began to see the development of international organizations like FIFA. You also saw more focus on governing organizations, focus on limiting racism in the 1900s, as well as in the early 1900s, the establishment of soccer in the Olympics, as well as in the 1930s. You also saw the World Cup established as well. These were primary focuses of FIFA and the various levels of soccer during each of these individual time periods as well. Within recent years, you also saw a little bit more focus on the few changes to the rules as well. However, player safety has really not been a focus of the organization according to FIFA. We'll take a look then at the second contention then of priorities as well. It's important to understand that whenever you're doing any activity, whether it's a business, it's a sport, or any activity whatsoever, the participants have to be valued the highest. This is simply simple logic. If the participants are being damaged or harmed by the participation in the sport, then it's extremely imperative that you actually find a way to make it safer for them. Otherwise, you're endangering the individuals who make the sport possible. Without the players, there would be no soccer. There would be no sport for us to enjoy. And thus, we have to consider what is most important for the players first and foremost. We'll also see how this would actually impact the leagues as well, the various officials, and support as well from a monetary standpoint in just a moment. Some point I end to this is more is needed. Again, it's very important to understand right now that FIFA has actually been very willing to admit, a spokesman speaking just last month admitted that concussion protocols currently are not enough. They allow you to actually go back on the field after suffering a concussion and continue playing despite the fact that you have a concussion. Again, this is incredibly dangerous. You can take a look at the NFL. A lot of recent studies done right now. We'll get into the more or less in just a moment in further contentions, but this is extremely dangerous right now, and they themselves have admitted that there needs to be more of a priority placed on these individuals and their safety. The second subpoint under this, again, is what would be the impact to the league as well. If you prioritize the players first and foremost, are you necessarily putting the league in danger? Well, not necessarily. Actually, you might actually end up helping the league as well. Again, take a look at the NFL as a parallel. The NFL right now earns on average about $6 billion per year, but they're spending right now about a sixth of that settling lawsuits over the very issue of player safety as well. So if you translate this issue of concussions, CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, I know this is a big word, we'll get more of that later on, but basically the idea being that in this instance, you're actually spending a great deal of money actually settling these issues and these lawsuits. Soccer naturally faces the same threats, actually. A number of lawsuits have been recently launched against FIFA and various other soccer organizations, so it's also within their best interest as well to solve this issue of player safety. Let's take a look at the final point then of danger as well. A couple of subpoints under this. The first one being concussions. The primary issue of player safety is in fact concussions. 63% of soccer players have had concussions. This is a number higher than every single other sport, including football, hockey, and wrestling. That's kind of an issue. Also, again, important to note that this specifically is 2.5 times as many concussions as you might suffer in other sports, including football. This coming from the Brookhaven Neurological Rehabilitation Institute. Again, it's very important to understand that they're starting to consider certain recommendations against this because they realize this is a very big problem. If soccer is literally the most dangerous sport you can play right now when it comes to your head injuries, that is a very serious issue. One reason being, again, lack of equipment and obviously the technique and the way the game is actually played. Also want to point out again, obviously there's a lack of money as well, but what are the actual impacts to the players themselves? The actual impacts, according to the Mayo Clinic at Boston University, is a loss of memory, depression, ALS, degenerative muscle diseases, and eventually, actually, death is the final cause or the final result of this disease. We'll take a look at the final subpoint then of the idea of the solution. It's important to note the U.S. National Library of Medicine notes it is feasible to actually place a new focus on this and solve these issues by placing more of an emphasis on preventive exercise, new equipment, better technique, stricter enforcement of penalties, so on and so forth, again and again and again. So basically, it's a very important issue. They understand it's a very important issue. They have options available, and thus for these reasons, I would urge that they focus on this issue. So once again, I urge affirmative ballot. Thank you. I'm open for any questions you may have at this time.
All right. All my judges ready? Okay, my opponent?
Absolutely.
Then we'll go ahead and get started. Now, the first question I have for you is, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
All right, great. Now, with that, I want to move on to the first actual question that pertains to this debate round. Now, are injuries inevitable in sports?
Certainly, they're inevitable and to some degree, but they're also preventable. Especially at this degree of severity, this should not be happening right now.
Okay.
But it's literally the most dangerous sport.
But can any preventative measure solve the problem completely?
Sure, absolutely. There's certain things that can solve this issue of concussions. Now, obviously, there are going to be some twisted ankles that you cannot actually solve for, but this issue of concussions can actually be solved.
So you can completely solve and say that no player will ever have a concussion again through implementing new protocols?
Not necessarily. I mean, obviously, 100% solvency is never going to be in any instance. However, you can prevent this and make it a much safer sport, which should obviously be a focus.
Great. Now, the next question I have is under your first contention, which was about the past focus. So for you, the past focus is just things that are further back in history, like when the soccer sport was created, correct?
Correct. The idea being, this is a new focus. I'm just demonstrating that in the past, they were focused on other things. Right now, it's something that they should be changing and shifting the focus less from how do we develop the league and make it more of an international recognized sport, and how do we actually make it safer for the players.
Okay.
That should be a new focus.
All right. Now, if I could ask a follow-up question on that. A new focus represents a changing of something that's happening right now, correct?
Right. It represents a change from the past, necessarily, yes.
Okay, great. Now, the concussion evidence that you presented about the numbers of concussions specifically, where was that from, and what was the study restricted to?
Correct. What they did is they actually took a number at the individuals who were actually being harmed or receiving these concussions in soccer. The specific source was the Brookhaven Rehabilitation Institute.
But how many students did it cover?
Sure. It actually didn't look at students specifically. It referred to the professional leagues and also analyzed the number and degree of severity in younger leagues as well. If you take a look at younger leagues as well, you'll find it's actually more common in players under the age of 15 as well.
Okay, great. That's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you. All my judges ready? Good? Yeah. All right, and my opponent? All right, then we will go ahead and get started. First of all, I do want to extend a round of thank yous to everybody in the room. Obviously, it takes a community to make debate work. You guys are all a part of that, so thank you for coming and being a part of that today. With that being said, however, I would like to move into some specific analysis of the round, the resolution, and the case the affirmative team has presented. Now, the first thing I'm going to look at is a couple of analysis points under the framework. What does this resolution mean, and what are the burdens placed upon each team? Now, the first point I'm going to bring up under framework is that in the resolution, the word "the" means a singular specific focus. The affirmative team has to focus on a specific thing because the word "the" is very singular and is very specific. For instance, you can think of the Titanic, not a Titanic, meaning one focus. Now, the second point I have under framework is a little bit of resolutional analysis. Now, the resolution implies the focus of youth soccer, and it says that we need to have a new focus on youth soccer. Now, it's important to understand that what this constitutes is a moving away from current focus, a new focus, something that we change, meaning we take the current system and we implement something new, something that wasn't already there. Therefore, anything in the status quo is constituted as old focus under the affirmative team's case. This is why we're going to see that under the affirmative team's case, he's actually focusing on the old focus and not the new focus. However, before I get to that, the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about his contentions and how I'm going to be responding to them. Under the first contention, we're going to see a little bit of analysis on that on my counter contention 1, so I'm just going to leave that on the back burner for now. However, under the second contention, he said that, look, we can prevent injuries and we can do that right now. First of all, this is incredibly non-unique to the issue of soccer specifically. Second of all, this is not unique to the issue of sports. Every time you step on the field, you are at a risk of injury. You can pad a kid up as much as you want to, but once he steps on the field, he is still going to get hurt. It's inevitable. If any of you have kids in this room, you know as soon as they step outside, there's a risk and a probability that they're probably going to get hurt. Despite the amount of preventative measures in the status quo, this is inevitable. Now, second of all, he mentioned how there's not enough concussion protocols, and he mentioned, I believe, evidence from a few months ago. However, what has the reaction been to that statement? He said that people from FIFA said, look, there's not enough concussion protocols. What he failed to tell you is there's been a recent change in concussion protocols as of the last few weeks to implement more concussion protocols and to solve this issue of player safety. Meaning, one, it's not a new focus to have player safety because it's the focus right now, and two, this is already being solved in the status quo. This point also applies to his danger to players point, where he said, look, there's a significant danger to players. We need to change the current system. Concussions are bad. I agree. However, in the current system, this is being changed as of a few weeks ago. This is different. Now, with that being said, I want to move on to my off case and to some counter contentions that I have to the affirmative team. Now, my first contention is the old focus. Again, I want to cross-apply the analysis that I gave you, where the old focus means anything that's happening now because we're moving away from it and we're implementing something different. The old focus is actually health and safety. That's been the focus for a number of years. Now, my first point under this is that if it's the old focus, it can't also be the new focus that's counteracting to the resolution, meaning he needs to prove a different new focus than from what's happening right now. My second point under this is that a new focus implies the change. Now, my first subpoint under that is going to be that the recent mandatory concussion training that I have told you has been implemented. This is from AP.com as of 2 days ago. FIFA has mandated new concussion protocols as of this week. That means that all of his points about concussions being bad, while yes are true, actually work to the negative side of argumentation because it proves that it's just old focus. It's what's happening right now. The one thing I want to mention specifically under that is one specific program that does a lot for the health and safety in the status quo. Brandy Chastain, who is a very successful women's soccer player, is actually implementing programs to help women work with their bodies and essentially lower the risk of injury. Studies have shown that they're more susceptible to injury through the sport of soccer, and she's actually working on this, according to Time Magazine, for the safety of the players. Now, the next thing I want to bring up is in the current system, the House of U.S. Energy and Commerce has opened a discussion as of this week about the treatment and injury in the sport of soccer. The reason they do this is because soccer is key to international commerce throughout the world because it reaches so many people, as my opponent talked about, it's universal. So just as this week, the U.S. House of Energy and Commerce has opened this discussion about how to make soccer safer. It is the current focus. It is being done in the status quo. So we need to look at what should the new focus be. Instead of the affirmatives case saying that the new focus should be safety, which it already is, let's look at the actual new focus. Human rights. That should be the new focus. I have a couple subpoints under this. The A under this is going to be that there's problem with gender rights in soccer right now. It's a massive problem in the status quo. The B point under this is going to be that there's a lack of focus and there's a lack of equal pay for women. They're not focusing on this in the status quo. Now, the U.S. women's soccer team, if you watch soccer at all, has had unparalleled success, more success than the men's soccer team. However, they get paid on average $7,000 less per game. There's no reason for this other than the breakdown and the non-focus on the human rights atrocities and the non-focus on the differences of women in this sport. Now, the next thing I want to bring up is not just the difference between the pay of men and women, but the universal human rights abuses that are taking place when we build these stadiums. Right now, we're building a massive stadium in Qatar. Let's look at some of the abuses that take place under this. Now, the people who want to work on this stadium, they must actually pay a stipend to work on the stadium. They have to pay to get hired. Now, the stipend is $4,300 to work. However, these workers make less than $200 a month. So they have to work for 3 years to even pay off the debt that is caused by wanting to work on the stadium. Also, they have their passports removed and they're in a contract so that they have to stay with their employer. They're indentured slaves to the people that build these stadiums. This is according to the New York Times, The Guardian, and also BBC, who all reported on this issue. We have indentured servants and slaves working on these stadiums who can't get out of their contract. They do not have freedom of choice. They can't move away from this work. It is a work that's kept them indentured and in debt and in the current system. Again, the old focus, this is being taken care of. The new focus is something that needs to be changed and it warrants a negative ballot. Thank you. That's perfectly fine.
All judges ready then? All right. Thank you very much for a great speech. Just a couple of questions to make sure I understand everything that you just said. Let's take a look at your off case first. The tag of the first contention, repeat it for me, please.
The tagline of the first contention was old focus.
Okay.
Which can also be interpreted as current focus.
Sure. Now, you know that there are some actually several actions being taken right now by various organizations to actually combat the concussion protocols. Yep. Can you specify exactly which organizations are taking those steps?
FIFA took the steps. Brandy Chastain was that's a tough name. Brandy Chastain is taking individual steps. And also I mentioned the U.S. House of Commerce.
Okay. All right. Now, you did agree to all definitions, is that correct? Just as a side note?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let's take a look back at the on case then. You know, the past folks, essentially you're arguing that the counter contention is the response to this, so there is essentially you're arguing that we are already doing this, is that correct?
Yes.
We are, however, doing this on certain levels, is that correct?
Well, yes, we are, but it's pretty much universal.
Are we doing this on all levels?
Yeah, no, we are. It's just different steps for each level. For instance, FIFA
Does FIFA
mandated
actually mandate specific policies for youth soccer leagues in the United States?
FIFA does not, but what
Okay,
does is
let's
the
take
U.S.
a look
House
at
of
the second
Commerce that I
contention.
also mentioned.
Okay, let's take a look at the second contention then, the priorities. Essentially, you're arguing it's non-unique to soccer, is that correct?
Yep, sure.
Was there any challenge to the fact that this, however, soccer is the single most dangerous sport which actually suffers the most from this issue?
Well, I mentioned the point that all of your evidence came before the new concussion protocols were implemented, so we're going to see a decline in those numbers.
All right. Your second subpoint then under this, was there a specific response to it?
I'm sorry?
My second subpoint under this, was there a specific response to it, that this is actually in the best interest of the league, again, to continue responding to this?
Oh, is it the fact that there was best interest in the league? Is that what you're saying? Is that the
Right.
second subpoint?
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I said, look, it is in the best interest of the league, but we've already done it, so there's no reason to redo it. We need to have a different
Okay,
focus.
so what you're arguing is that the fact that FIFA has certain protocols in place right now, and the fact that the U.S. House of Commerce is investigating proves, however, that this is essentially an old focus. Is that what you're arguing?
Actually, what I'm arguing is that all of the implementation
Sure.
of the rules in this league, it's not just an investigation, it's implementation of protocols. That is what's going to cause this decline in numbers.
Okay.
Does that get your question?
Let's take a look at human rights as well. You would agree that there's a very standard hierarchy of rights, which include the rights to life being at the top. Is that correct?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. No further questions. Are all the judges ready then? Can I have one as well? Great. Let's get started. All right, thank you very much, judges, for sticking with us even still. Thank you very much, opponent, for a great case as well. I just have a few responses I want to make. First of all, addressing the definitions debate just a little bit. There's one thing I want to clarify just briefly. My opponent brought up a new argument, essentially, not rather a new argument. The argument is that there are new protocols in place, thus we've already solved this problem. It's an old focus rather than a new focus. However, I'd like to point you back to the idea of in soccer specifically. We're referring to every single level of soccer. My opponent says that FIFA is actually making some things happen right now, as is the U.S. House of Commerce. Our response is A, U.S. House of Commerce is not topical, is not part of a soccer organization specifically. Secondly, under this issue, FIFA, while it is part of soccer, is only one level at various levels as well. They have absolutely no jurisdiction over youth soccer, high school soccer, college soccer, absolutely none whatsoever. So yes, while FIFA is doing something, it's time for every single other level of soccer to join FIFA and making that effort and creating that new focus for them as well. Because right now, FIFA is the only one, other than Brendan Chastain, who's actually doing anything about it. We'll take a look now at the on case and the off case as well. First being the past focus, again, counter contention 1. Again, you can simply cross-apply the definitions debate about this as well. Yes, FIFA is doing something. It's about time the rest of soccer got involved and actually made something happen as well. Second contention, that idea of priorities, Yogi says that is non-unique to soccer. I just put out that again, soccer is the one who actually suffers the most in this instance. Yes, other sports also suffer, but because soccer suffers the most, that is why this is a greater priority for them than it might be for other sports as well. I'm not saying that other sports should not also be prioritizing this as well. I'm simply saying that for soccer right now, that's what the resolution is asking us to talk about. Thus, that's what I'm advocating should be prioritizing it as well. Again, the second sub-point as well, I believe, still stands in the round state as well. It is within their best interest financially for soccer leagues to actually do this. Again, because many of them have not actually taken any steps yet. FIFA is the only one who's actually taking these steps as well. Third contention, that it's danger as well. Again, please continue to cross-apply all of the argumentation and allow it to flow across the round, because yes, FIFA is doing something, but everyone else is not doing anything whatsoever. You're going to see far more youth, high school, college players than you are going to see professional players. They're far more amateur than professional players. They are still at risk, and something still needs to be done about this. We can take a look at the off case then. The first contention being that they can't be the old focus, but versus the new focus. Again, continue to cross-apply. It still needs to be a new focus, because you have one organization doing something while the rest of them simply do not. We'll take a look at the second contention, that there are new protocols in place again. Again, continue to cross-apply. There are new protocols, but they are extremely limited, and they're extremely limited to one organization, while every other level of soccer continues to suffer, especially those who are actually most vulnerable, as my opponent had no response to the fact that youth players right now are actually more at risk of concussions than professional players are as well. Under the third point of human rights, I'd like to point out once again that human rights should be the new focus. Yes, I would agree. However, I'd ask you to cross-apply two arguments. First, the second contention in the affirmative case of priorities. Again, they have to prioritize the players. Second, I'd also like to point out that the examples he's bringing up are strictly limited primarily to the professional level of the World Cup or the FIFA organization as well. You don't see these in amateur levels. And finally, again, life is the highest human right, as my opponent conceded in cross-examination. As long as brain injuries are causing a threat to the life of the players, obviously this has to be the highest priority if you're going to truly value human rights in today's round. So once again, I urge an affirmative ballot. Thank you.
Okay, are all my judges ready? I can go ahead and start whenever you are. Just let me know individually. Good. Awesome. All right, well, this is the last negative speech, so I do want to reiterate my thank yous from the first speech, but I do think that it is better to focus on the argumentation at hand to help you as the judges make the decision. Now, I want to point you back to something I told you in my first speech. I said that to win the round, the affirmative must prove that health is a new focus rather than an old focus, primarily, and secondarily, that it should be the new focus over something like human rights. This is going to become a problem when we've seen that first, there's been no significant analysis on why it's different than the current focus, and second, why it should be valued above the human rights of these individuals. We see no analysis on those 2 points. With that being said, I'm going to move into the on-case points, what I want to address on case. Now, the first contention is that, well, just because it's the old focus doesn't mean it also can't be the new focus. However, like I told you in my first speech, my analysis still applies. A new focus means a changing of something. It means a progression to something new. New in and of itself implies that it's not here now. We need to create it. It needs to become new. There's been no response to this analysis. Second of all, I already told you that this is already being done in the system. I give you multiple examples of how on every level it is being applied. Changes are being applied. Let me run down the list for you. First, at the top level, there is FIFA. FIFA is implementing changes through the professional levels and through the professional leagues. Now, second, the United States Health and Commerce Department is implementing a soccer program. He said that this is not resolutional because it's not specific to soccer. However, what the United States Health and Commerce is doing is it's having a convention about soccer and about the sport. It does surround the sport, it does pertain to the sport, and therefore it is resolutional. The United States House of Commerce is saying, look, all levels, collegiate and below, need to prescribe by these set of standards. These are concussion standards. These are standards telling you that, look, concussions are bad, but it's already being fixed. It's being done in the status quo. There's no need for the affirmative team. So again, he told you it still needs to be the new focus. However, if we're taking the steps already, why have it be the new focus? Why not focus on something better? Why not focus on something that increases the lives of individuals? You know, one thing I just want to throw on the list of all levels, down to the kids level, Brandy Chastain's program doesn't specifically pertain to women. It also is being echoed by men that are pertaining and that are applying it to the bottom level. From top to bottom, from professional to Pee Wee soccer, there is coverage, there is concussion protocol, there is training for coaches on every single level. I have provided you examples of that in this round, examples showing that it is the focus and that it is working and that these numbers will continue to decline. We've seen no counter-analysis from the affirmative team of why this is not the case. Now, his response to contention 2 was pretty much the same as his response to contention 1 when he told me that, well, health still needs to be the new focus. However, there's a couple problems with this. First of all, we've seen no response to the specific analysis where I told you that this is a more important focus. And second of all, as I've told you, this is the old focus. In order for it to be new, we have to renew it. We have to make it new. Now, on to the specific argumentation. I've told you that basically what we have in the system is indentured servitude to the people that are building these stadiums. This is in the US and this is also across the world. One, there's been no counteracting to this point. He's not told you why either A, it's a good thing, or why either B, it should be fixed in his plan. But secondly, he has not told you why it is preferable to leave these people in a condition that they are just to treat some brain injuries that are being treated already. I've already told you that the concussion problem is being taken care of in the status quo. So why don't we move on? Why don't we move forward? And why don't we take care of these other egregious offenses? Yes, life is one of the biggest values that we need to uphold, but why leave people in such a poor quality of life where they're unable to live their life to a fullest extent? So literally this round has come down to 2 things. First, whether concussions are being taken care of. On the negative side, we have seen multiple pieces of analysis on how every level it's being taken care of. FIFA at the top level, implementing protocols less than a week ago. U.S. House of Commerce, implementing protocols from the collegiate level all the way down less than a week ago. On the Pee Wee level, Brandy Chastain's programs have worked. They are continuing to work. This is actually an older program, and that's because if you actually look at the analysis from the older, analysis from like 2 or 3 years ago from the sport, it has showed that Brandy Chastain's program is working, and there's a decline in injuries at that level. So concussions are being taken care of, yes. So B, why don't we move on? Why don't we improve the quality of life for other people? Why don't we improve the quality of life? Now, the last thing that I want to point to your attention is about the lack of focus for an equal pay for women. This is something that when cold conceded by the affirmative team, we need to ensure equality in our society. So Judge, if you vote negative today, it is a vote for equality, make sure that men and women both get paid the same. It is also a vote for helping those that are in essentially indentured servitude building these stadiums. I've already told you they're going to be in debt because they can't pay. And also third, if you vote for the negative team, it is still a vote for removing and reducing the risk of concussions because it's in the status quo, it is working, move on to a new focus, help women that are underpaid, help servants that are underpaid, essentially slaves that are underpaid, and move on and vote for negative in today's debate round. Thank you.
ready?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this round. Hope you have as well, and all the judges as well. I want to take a look at just a couple of the big arguments my opponent brought up in his voting issues, and I'm going to get in a couple of voting issues in support of the affirmative team as well. The first one being, is are concussions already being taken care of? I'd like to go back to the studies he's brought forward indicating that they are actually being taken care of, and we'll address those one more time just in case. Again, FIFA, an organization, we've already discussed this as well, is one organization that applies to professional players only. It does not actually apply to domestic players, nor does it apply to amateur players as well. He does have the U.S. House of Commerce, which he claims is actually applying to every single level of organization. I would like to point out, however, that this is, again, still not topical nor resolutional. If you take a look at the resolution statement that I made in my last speech, the focus, new focus in soccer is the way the resolution is actually worded. This is why I said that the U.S. House of Commerce has nothing to do with the resolution specifically, because the fact that the government is focusing on this does not mean that soccer itself is focusing on this issue. Again, that's the point that we're trying to make here right now, is while individuals are telling soccer you should focus on this, that doesn't necessarily mean that soccer itself is actually focusing on this issue. And in fact, they really should be, if you take a look at all the evidence brought forward in today's round. He also has an argument that Brandon Chastain's program is actually applying to the Pee Wee levels as well. Again, that's fine. We can take a look at the Pee Wee levels, and we can take a look at the players playing in the World Cup, but that still leaves a huge amount of high school, college players and or amateur players who are playing at a semi-professional level but are still not benefiting from FIFA's actions. You can see that the majority of players right now, amateur players that I mentioned in my last speech, are not being taken care of right now, and this did not go challenged by my opponent. The only thing he's providing for is non-topical solutions, or a couple of players in the Pee Wee leagues and in the World Cup being taken care of, while the vast majority of players are left to fend for themselves as well. Let's take a look at the second voting issue, the vote for equality. Again, I'd like to point out that the primary argument I was making is not that I'm against equality necessarily, judges. I'm not asking you to vote down equal pay for women. I'm not asking you to vote down human rights. However, as we covered in my last speech, you have to take a look at two arguments my opponent completely dropped. The first is the priority for the league has to be the priority of the players necessarily. The priority of soccer has to be the priority of the players necessarily. Why is this? Because if you take a look at, say, for example, FIFA, yes, there are human rights abuses, but there's simply one organization, however. This is an issue that is limited to the pro level that does not necessarily apply to the amateur level, and the amateur players still need to be taken care of as well. Second, there was no response to my argument in my last speech. If you want to actually care for human rights, life obviously is the highest priority, above even equality necessarily. Although equality is a good thing, the human rights of the lives of the players have to be considered first and foremost. We'll take a look at just a couple of voting issues, and the first one would be the big picture. Again, obviously, yes, there are some good things being done, but my opponent has not demonstrated that it's actually being done for the majority of the players. In order to prove that the majority of the players are being helped, more must be done. Second contention, or voting issue rather, is the priority. Again, obviously, we do value human rights as well, but we have to value the human right of life first and foremost. My opponent conceded this in cross-examination. Third and final voting issue would again be the net benefits as well. Obviously, good things are being done, but more good can be done. If you take a look at net benefits, we're looking on the whole, not just parts. And for all these reasons, I once again urge an affirmative ballot. Thank you for your time.
I would shake all of your hands for that one. So, thank you guys all.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
gentlemen.
Congrats to both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
We won't be disclosing, so feel free to head over to the banquet.
Okay.
And we'll hear the results soon.
Great, thank you.
Please tell me you were actually getting audio on that.
I don't think I've turned it off. Oh, thank you.
So you were actually recording?
No, I'm still recording.